At the holiday table, my children pretended I didn't exist, whispering, "The old fool is no longer needed by anyone." I said nothing, but published the will in which I deprived them of the inheritance. Their eyes bulged. They exploded with furious screams. I stayed silent, watching their expectations shatter against reality, for betrayal won't go unpunished. Before continuing, subscribe to the channel and write in the comments what time it is in your region right now. The key turned in the lock with its familiar click, and I stepped into my house on that Thursday evening, December 12th. 45 years of building Harrison's Pharmacy from a single storefront to 4 locations across Phoenix should have earned me some peace in my own home. Instead, I heard laughter from the kitchen. My son Robert's voice, his wife Quinn's sharp tone, and Felicity's nasal cackle mixing together. I set my briefcase down and walked toward the sound. The closer I got, the clearer their voices became. "Did you see his face when I told him we'd already planned everything?" Quinn's voice dripped with amusement. "Classic," Felicity responded. "The old fool actually thought we'd want his input." My hand froze on the doorframe. Robert's voice was quieter, uncertain. "I don't know. Maybe we should—" "Should what?" Quinn cut him off. "Let him ruin Christmas with his outdated ideas. No thanks." I stepped into the doorway. The laughter died instantly. 3 faces turned toward me, and the temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Evening," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "What's so funny?" Quinn looked at me like I'd interrupted a private meeting. She stood up, her chair scraping against the tile. "Nothing that would interest you, James." She brushed past me, leaving a cloud of expensive perfume in her wake. "That Chanel No. 5 I'd bought her last Christmas." Felicity, Quinn's mother, who'd been living in my guest room for 3 years now, wrinkled her nose. "You smell like old medicine and mothballs, James. Maybe shower before dinner? We're having guests later." The "we" was particularly galling, as if this were her house, as if she paid the mortgage or the utilities or the property taxes. She didn't wait for my response before turning to Robert. "Honey, did you remember to pick up that wine I wanted? The expensive one from Scottsdale?" My son, 42 years old, and still unable to look his father in the eye, nodded and pulled out his phone. Just like that, I ceased to exist in my own kitchen. I might as well have been furniture. No, furniture got more consideration. I stood there feeling something shift inside my chest. Not anger exactly, more like recognition. Like finally seeing a pattern you've been staring at for months without really looking. I turned and walked to my study. Behind me, the laughter started up again. Quieter, more cautious, but definitely there. Later that evening, I tried again. I found them in the living room. Quinn scrolled through her tablet, probably those interior design websites she was always browsing. Robert pretended to watch basketball. Felicity knitted what looked like a lumpy snake. "I wanted to talk about Christmas plans," I said, settling into my armchair, "since it's less than 2 weeks away." Quinn didn't glance up. "We've already handled it." "You've handled it," I repeated slowly. "Yes." "Robert, did you send that email to the caterer about the menu changes?" Robert shifted uncomfortably. His eyes darted to me, then away. "Quinn, maybe Dad wants to—" "Your father can contribute financially if he wants," Felicity interrupted, needles clicking. "We certainly don't expect him to do any actual work at his age. The last thing we need is him getting confused and ordering the wrong things. Remember last year when he bought regular eggnog instead of organic?" I remembered that perfectly. I'd bought regular eggnog because it was half the price and tasted the same. Apparently, that was evidence of my declining mental state, rather than basic fiscal responsibility. The casual cruelty landed like a slap, not the words themselves, but the tone, the assumption that I was incompetent, that my opinion didn't matter, that I was a burden to be managed rather than the man who owned the roof over their heads and paid for everything. Quinn finally looked at me, and what I saw was worse than contempt. It was impatience, like I was a stubborn stain she couldn't quite scrub out yet. "We'll let you know what we decide, James. Don't worry your head about it." Don't worry your head, like I was a child, or senile. "This is my house," I said quietly. "Of course it is." She returned to her tablet. "And we're so grateful you let us stay here while we help take care of you." Help take care of me. I was 68, not 98. I still ran 4 pharmacies across Phoenix. I still drove myself to work every morning, I still reviewed contracts, managed inventory, handled personnel issues. I had all my faculties, despite what they seemed to think, or want others to think. I stood up and walked to my study, closing the door with careful precision. Too hard would seem like anger. Too soft would seem like defeat. I settled for firm. I sat in the leather chair I'd bought 20 years ago, when business was booming and I thought I was building something to pass down to my son. Now I wondered what exactly Robert was waiting to inherit. My business? My dignity? Or just for me to become senile enough that they could do whatever they pleased? Something had broken tonight, not in the house, but in me. The part that wanted to believe my family still saw me as family. The part that made excuses for Quinn's coldness, or Felicity's barbs, or Robert's cowardice. That part had finally shattered. I pulled out a legal pad and wrote the date at the top. Then I started listing things. Small things I'd dismissed over the past months. Moments I'd rationalized away. Comments I'd pretended not to hear. A pattern was emerging, and I needed to see it clearly before deciding what to do. Because one thing I'd learned in 45 years of business: you don't fight enemies you don't understand. First, you gather information. Then you make a plan. Then you execute with precision. And something told me I was going to need all three. I didn't sleep well that night. My mind kept circling back through the months, picking at memories like scabs. Friday morning, December 13th, I called into the pharmacy and told my manager I'd be working from home. Then I locked myself in my study with my legal pad and a pot of coffee. The memories came flooding back once I stopped trying to push them away. October 15th, Robert's 42nd birthday. I'd been at the pharmacy until 6, then rushed home expecting the usual small family dinner. Instead, I found a note on the kitchen counter. Took Robert out for his birthday. Didn't want to bother you. Leftovers in the fridge. They'd gone to his favorite steakhouse, the one where we used to celebrate every year, without me. When I asked Quinn about it later, she'd look surprised. "Oh, did you want to come? I thought you'd be too tired from work. We were doing you a favor, really." I wrote it down. Incident 1. September 8th. I'd been in my study, door slightly ajar, when I heard Felicity on the phone in the hallway. She didn't know I was home. "Oh, Martha, you should see him lately," she'd said to whoever was on the other end. "Forgets things constantly. Repeats himself. Between you and me, it won't be long now before he completely loses it. Then Quinn and Robert can finally make some decisions around here without him interfering. It's sad, really, but it's nature's way." I'd sat frozen at my desk, listening to her describe a version of me that didn't exist. I didn't forget things. I ran 4 successful businesses. But she was building a narrative, brick by brick, setting the stage for something. I wrote it down. Incident 2. November the 20th. Robert had come to my study with a folder of papers. "Dad, I need you to sign these. Just some banking stuff, nothing important." He'd tried to rush me, hovering over my shoulder, but I'd spent 4 decades reading contracts and fine print. These weren't banking documents. They were power of attorney papers, broad ones, the kind that would give him control over my accounts, my properties, my business decisions. "Robert," I'd said calmly, "why exactly do you need power of attorney over my affairs?" His face had gone red. "It's just," Quinn thought, "in case something happens to you, we should be prepared." "Nothing's happening to me. I'm 68, not on my deathbed." He'd taken the papers back, mumbling something about just being cautious, and left quickly. I dismissed it as Quinn putting ideas in his head. Now I saw it differently. It was a failed first attempt. I wrote it down. Incident 3. The coffee grew cold as I filled page after page. The time Quinn had reorganized my medications to help me remember them, but actually made it harder to find what I needed. The conversations that stopped when I entered rooms. The way Felicity had started making comments about nice facilities for seniors whenever news stories mentioned retirement homes. It wasn't sudden. It was systematic. A slow, deliberate campaign to push me to the margins of my own life, to paint me as incompetent, to make me invisible in my own house. And for what? The answer was obvious, really. Money, property, inheritance. They weren't helping me. They were circling like vultures, waiting for me to either die or become too confused to stop them from taking what they wanted. I sat back and looked at my notes. 10 pages of evidence. 10 pages of disrespect and manipulation dressed up as concern. Here's what they didn't know about me. I didn't build 4 pharmacies by being passive. I didn't survive in business for 45 years by letting people walk over me. And I certainly didn't get to where I was by ignoring warning signs. They wanted me to be a helpless old man. Fine. Let them think that. Let them get comfortable in their assumptions. Meanwhile, I'd do what I always did when facing a problem. Assess the situation, gather resources, and formulate a strategy. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my contacts until I found Charles Davidson, my attorney for the past 20 years, a man who understood that sometimes the best defense was a carefully constructed defense. The call went to voicemail. Charles, it's James Harrison. I need to schedule a meeting. Somewhere private, not my house. Let's say Monday at your office. I need to discuss some changes to my estate planning. Call me back. I hung up and looked at my notes again. This wasn't about revenge. Not really. This was about protecting what I'd built and teaching 3 people that respect isn't optional just because someone gets older. They thought they were so clever, planning their future on my dime, whispering about my decline, treating me like furniture. They had no idea what was coming, and that was exactly how I wanted it. I smiled to myself, closed the legal pad, and stood up. I had work to do, phone calls to make, preparations to set in motion. Because if there's one thing I learned running a business in Phoenix for 4.5 decades, it's this. Arizona law is very, very clear about property rights and inheritance, and I was about to become an expert in both. Saturday morning, December 14th. I woke up early, my mind churning through possibilities. Sleep had been elusive these past 2 nights. I decided a walk might clear my head. The Phoenix morning air was cool and crisp. I headed out around 7 before anyone else in the house stirred. That was deliberate. I didn't want to see their faces, didn't want to pretend everything was normal. I was checking the mail near my front gate when I heard a familiar voice. "James! Up early, I see." Leo Kramer, my neighbor of 15 years, was putting up Christmas lights on his porch. Retired attorney, sharp as ever despite being 73. "Couldn't sleep?" I said, walking over. "You're ambitious with those decorations." He laughed, climbing down from his ladder. "Martha's orders. Apparently our display last year was embarrassing." He wiped his hands on his jeans. "How about you? Ready for the holidays?" "As ready as I'll ever be." "Family coming over?" "They're already here, living with me, actually." "Oh, right. Robert and his wife. And isn't her mother staying with you, too?" I nodded, keeping my expression neutral. Leo had no idea what was happening under my roof. "It's a full house? Well, that's nice. Family together for the holidays." He paused, squinting up at the roofline. "Speaking of which, I saw Quinn and her mother the other day. Thursday afternoon, I think, over by Camelback Road." Something in his tone made me pay attention. "Oh?" "Yeah, they were coming out of that place. Sunset Meadows? That fancy senior living facility?" He said it casually, just making conversation. "Martha and I were there checking it out for her Aunt Dorothy. Beautiful place, but the prices are steep. $8,000 a month minimum." My heart rate picked up, but I kept my voice level. "Sunset Meadows. I've heard of it. Premium care, they say. Martha chatted with your daughter-in-law for a bit in the parking lot. Quinn mentioned something about planning a quiet Christmas, reducing stress." He chuckled. "Don't we all want that? A quiet Christmas. Reducing stress. My stress, presumably, by removing me from the equation entirely." "Sounds lovely," I managed to say. "Well, I better get back to these lights before Martha critiques my spacing." He started climbing the ladder again. "Enjoy your walk, James. Merry Christmas, in case I don't see you before then." "Merry Christmas, Leo." I walked away on autopilot, my mind racing. Sunset Meadows wasn't just any facility. It was where wealthy families tucked away their elderly relatives when they became inconvenient. Beautiful grounds, excellent medical care, and completely out of sight. $8,000 a month. For how long were they planning to keep me there? A year? 2? At that rate, my savings would drain quickly, especially if they gained access to my business accounts. Through that power of attorney, Robert had tried to slip past me. The pieces were falling into place with horrifying clarity. This wasn't just about disrespect. This was a calculated plan to institutionalize me, take control of my assets, and live off the proceeds while I rotted in some expensive prison disguised as luxury senior living. I walked for another hour, circling the neighborhood while my thoughts organized themselves. By the time I returned home, I knew exactly what I needed to do. The house was quiet when I entered. They were probably still sleeping or avoiding me. Fine. I needed privacy anyway. In my study, I pulled out the legal pad where I'd been documenting incidents. I added a new entry. December 14th. Confirmed visit to Sunset Meadows. $8,000 per month. Plan to institutionalize me now clear. Beneath that, I started a new list. Not of grievances this time, but of actions. Steps I needed to take. People I needed to contact. Documents I needed to secure. First, Charles Davidson, my attorney. I'd called him Friday and left a message. If he hadn't returned my call by Monday morning, I'd show up at his office unannounced. Second, review current will and estate documents. I needed to know exactly what Robert stood to inherit under the existing arrangement. Third, gather financial documentation. Bank statements, business valuations, property deeds, everything needed to be accounted for and protected. Fourth, medical records. If they were going to try claiming I was incompetent, I needed proof of my sound mind. My last physical had been in October. Dr. Mitchell had declared me healthier than most 50-year-olds. I worked through the morning, pulling files, organizing papers into neat stacks. This was familiar territory. I'd built a business empire through organization and attention to detail. Now I'd apply those same skills to protecting it. Around noon, I heard movement upstairs. Footsteps, voices, the sounds of my house being occupied by people actively plotting against me. Though irony wasn't lost on me, I looked at my notes again, feeling something shift inside me. The hurt from the past days was still there, but it was hardening into something else, something colder and more focused. They wanted to treat me like I was senile, helpless, a problem to be managed and tucked away. Fine. Let them think that. Let them believe their plan was working. Meanwhile, I'd be building something they'd never see coming. Because if 45 years in business had taught me anything, it was this. The best defense is a devastating offense. And I was about to mount one that would change everything. Monday morning, December 15th, I drove to my pharmacy on Indian School Road. Not the main location, but the second one I'd opened 12 years ago. I kept a small office there, nothing fancy, but private. Perfect for meetings I didn't want happening at home. Charles Davidson arrived at 10, punctual as always. He'd been my attorney for 2 decades, handling everything from business contracts to estate planning. If anyone could help me navigate what was coming, it was Charles. "James," he said, shaking my hand firmly, "your message sounded urgent. What's going on?" I gestured to the chair across from my desk. "I need to make some significant changes to my will. Immediately." His eyebrows went up, but he didn't question it. Just pulled out his legal pad and pen. "All right. Walk me through what you're thinking." I laid it all out. The systematic disrespect, the attempted power of attorney grab, the visit to Sunset Meadows. Charles listened without interrupting, his expression growing more serious with each detail. "So they're planning to have you declared incompetent," he said when I finished, "gain control of your assets and park you in expensive senior living while they burn through your money. That's the plan, as far as I can tell. Except you're not incompetent, and you're not going to let that happen." "Exactly?" Charles leaned back in his chair, thinking. "Arizona law is very clear on property rights and estate planning. As the sole owner of your business and your home, you have absolute authority to dispose of your assets as you see fit. They can contest a will, but they'd need to prove undue influence or mental incapacity. I had my annual physical in October. Clean bill of health, including cognitive function tests. "Perfect. Get me a copy of those records." He started writing. "Now, what do you want the new will to say?" I'd thought about this carefully. Everything goes to the Arizona Children's Medical Research Foundation. The business, the properties, the investment accounts. All of it. All of it? Nothing for Robert? $1, as acknowledgement that he wasn't forgotten, just disinherited. Charles didn't flinch. "That's cold, James. So is planning to have your father committed for profit." "Fair point," he kept writing. "What about other relatives, cousins, nieces, nephews?" "Small trust for my cousin Martha and her kids. 200,000 split equally. She's been kind to me over the years, always remembered birthdays, visits at holidays, actually cared. All right, I can draft this today, have it ready for review tomorrow. I need it done faster than that. Can we execute it by Tuesday, December 17th? He looked up from his notes. That's 2 days from now. I'm aware. James, are you sure you don't want to wait? Think this through a bit more? Maybe try talking to Robert first? I met his eyes. I've thought about nothing else for 3 days, and I'm done talking. They've made their intentions clear. Now I'm making mine clear. Okay, he nodded slowly. I'll have the documents ready by tomorrow afternoon. You'll need 2 witnesses for the signing, people who can testify you were of sound mind. I'll bring Frank and Margaret. They've worked at my main pharmacy for over 20 years, known me since before Robert was born. Good choices. And James? Charles closed his legal pad. You should know, when this gets out, things are going to get ugly. Robert and his wife won't take this lying down. I'm counting on it. He studied me for a moment. You're really doing this? Without hesitation. All right, then. Let's make sure everything is airtight. He stood up. I'll call you tomorrow by noon with the draft. Review it carefully, make any changes you want, and we'll schedule the signing. After Charles left, I spent the rest of Monday and all day Tuesday preparing. I transferred important documents from my home safe to my bank's safety deposit box. Birth certificate, property deeds, stock certificates, the old will, business incorporation papers, everything Robert might try to access or alter. I made copies of my medical records and had them notarized, ordered updated valuations for all 4 pharmacy locations, called my accountant, and had him prepare a complete financial statement. If they wanted to claim I didn't know what I was doing, I'd have a paper trail showing meticulous awareness of every asset. Tuesday afternoon, I reviewed Charles's draft. It was perfect, cold, precise, and legally unassailable. The preamble stated clearly, being of sound mind and body, I hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils. The distributions were explicit. Robert Harrison, $1. Arizona Children's Medical Research Foundation, the remainder of the estate, estimated it at $6.8 million. Wednesday, December 17th, I met Charles at his office. Frank and Margaret came with me, looking slightly confused but willing to help. I signed the will at 2 p.m., with Charles and a notary, named Linda Shaw, witnessing. Frank and Margaret signed as witnesses, attesting to my competency. It's done, Charles said, handing me the executed original. Keep this somewhere very safe. I've got copies in my office vault. I held the document, feeling its weight. 20 pages that represented 45 years of work, now directed toward helping sick children instead of enriching ungrateful relatives. Thank you, Charles. Don't thank me yet. The hard part's still coming. I know. I drove home with the will in my briefcase, feeling strangely calm. The trap was set. Now I just had to wait for Christmas Eve, when I'd spring it in front of everyone. 7 more days. 7 days of pretending everything was normal, while sitting on a bomb that would destroy their carefully laid plans. I could wait 7 days. After 45 years of building something worth protecting, I could definitely wait 7 days. Part 5, December 24th, Christmas Eve. The day I'd been waiting for arrived with crisp morning sunlight streaming through my bedroom window. I got up early, showered, dressed in my best casual clothes. If this was going to be a performance, I wanted to look the part. Downstairs, the house was already buzzing with activity. Quinn had been up since 6, barking orders at Robert and Felicity. The dining room table was being transformed into something from a magazine spread. Crystal glasses, fine china I'd bought years ago, elaborate centerpieces with pine branches and gold ribbons. I stood in the doorway of my study, watching them work. They moved around the space with the ease of ownership, discussing placement and presentation as if I didn't exist, which I suppose was exactly the point. Robert, those napkins are crooked. Fix them. Quinn's voice carried that edge I'd come to recognize, the one that meant she was stressed and looking for someone to control. They look fine to me, Robert muttered, but he adjusted them anyway. Your sister and her husband will be here at 6, Felicity said, setting out serving dishes. Curtis is very particular about presentation. We need everything perfect. Curtis, Quinn's brother, whom I'd met exactly twice in the 5 years Robert had been married to his sister. Both times he'd barely acknowledged my existence, too busy networking and name-dropping. I retreated to the living room with a book I had no intention of reading. The leather armchair by the window had become my observation post. I settled in, opened the book to a random page, and waited. They bustled past me repeatedly over the next few hours, Quinn carrying platters, Felicity adjusting decorations, Robert setting up the bar in the corner. Not once did any of them speak to me. Not once did they ask if I needed anything, wanted anything, had any preferences about the meal they were preparing in my house with my money. Around 4 o'clock, I heard Felicity whisper something to Robert in the hallway. I couldn't make out all the words, but I caught the essential parts. Just ignore the old man tonight. Let him sit quietly. He'll get tired and go to bed early anyway. Robert's response was too quiet to hear, but I saw him nod through the doorway. I smiled to myself and turned a page in my book. At 5, I got up and walked toward the kitchen. I was genuinely hungry, and there were appetizers laid out on the counter. Expensive cheese, crackers, some kind of pâté that probably cost more than a week's worth of groceries. "We haven't served yet." Quinn's voice stopped me before I reached the counter. She stood blocking my path, arms crossed. "Dinner starts at 6:30. You can wait in the living room." The tone was the same one you'd use with a child trying to sneak cookies before dinner. Dismissive, condescending. I looked at her for a long moment, watched the way her jaw was set, the challenge in her eyes. She wanted me to argue, to give her a reason to paint me as difficult and unreasonable in front of her brother tonight. "Of course," I said quietly. "I'll wait." I turned and walked back to my chair, my hand touching the envelope in my jacket pocket. The weight of those 20 pages felt substantial, real. Soon enough, everyone would understand exactly what they'd been playing with. Quinn's brother Curtis and his wife Jennifer arrived precisely at 6. The house filled with loud greetings, exclamations over the decorations, compliments on Quinn's outfit. I remained in my chair, watching the show. Curtis was exactly as I remembered him. Mid-40s, expensive suit, even on Christmas Eve. The kind of handshake that tries too hard. He walked past my chair with barely a glance. "James!" A nod, nothing more. "Curtis!" I returned the nod with equal warmth, which is to say, none at all. Jennifer at least smiled, though it didn't reach her eyes. "Merry Christmas." "Merry Christmas." Then they were absorbed into Quinn and Felicity's orbit, drawn into the dining room to admire the table settings and discuss the menu. Robert hovering at the edges, playing host in my house. I checked my watch. 6:15. Another 15 minutes until dinner. Another hour of their performance before I brought down the curtain. I could wait. I'd waited this long. A little longer wouldn't hurt. At 6:30, Quinn called everyone to the table. I stood and walked to the dining room, taking the seat at the far end. Not the head of the table where I usually sat, but the chair they'd designated for me, the one facing the wall, away from the main conversation. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. They'd literally turned my chair to face away from the family gathering. I sat down anyway, my jacket still on, the envelope still in my pocket. Let them have their moment. Let them think they'd won. Because in about an hour, when I pulled out that document and read it aloud, every assumption they'd made about this evening was going to shatter, like the crystal glasses on this table, and I was going to enjoy every second of it. Dinner began at 6:30. Quinn had outdone herself. Prime rib, roasted vegetables, elaborate potato gratin. I sat facing away from the main action, listening to them talk around me. "So, Curtis, how's real estate?" Felicity asked, passing bread without offering it to me. "Booming," Curtis said. "Just closed on a Scottsdale property. $4 million. My commission alone could buy a nice car." "Wonderful," Quinn beamed. "Robert and I have been thinking about investing. Maybe you could give us advice?" "Investing with what money? Robert's salary? The inheritance they were counting on?" "Of course," Curtis said. "Family helps family. That's what tonight is about. Being together with people who matter." He raised his glass. Everyone followed, except me. Nobody had filled mine. The conversation flowed around me. New Year's plans, renovations, vacations. I cut my meat and chewed slowly, saying nothing. "This house has so much potential," Quinn said. "When we finally renovate, I'm knocking out this wall. Open concept is more modern." "When?" not if, as if this were already her house. Robert shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. After the main course, Quinn stood. "I'll get dessert. Robert, help me?" From the kitchen, her voice drifted back. "Can you believe how quiet he's being? Perfect. Just like we planned." Felicity leaned toward Curtis and Jennifer. "Between you and me, he's been declining. Forgetful. Confused. We're looking into care facilities. It's the best thing." "That's hard," Jennifer said. "But you're doing the right thing?" I remained still, letting every word wash over me. Let them paint their picture. In minutes, I'd tear it down. Quinn returned with dessert, elaborate chocolate with gold leaf. She served everyone except me, then finally placed a small portion in front of me. "There you go, James." Pure condescension. She raised her glass. "A toast. To family. To the people who truly matter to us, who support us and stand by us. To Robert, to my mother, to Curtis and Jennifer." Her eyes swept past me. "To the people who make life worth living." Everyone clinked glasses. Robert met my eyes briefly, then looked away, flushed. I watched them drink, watched them celebrate. Then I set down my fork, reached into my pocket, pulled out the envelope. "Before dessert," I said calmly, "I have an announcement." Quinn's head snapped toward me. "James, we're in the middle of—" "This won't take long." I pulled out the document. "I recently made changes to my estate planning. I thought tonight would be perfect to share." Silence. Even Curtis stopped mid-bite. "What are you talking about?" Robert's voice was uncertain. I smoothed the pages. "This is my new will, executed December 17th, properly witnessed and notarized." Quinn's face went pale. "You can't be serious." "Completely serious. Let me read the relevant sections." Felicity's hand trembled. Curtis and Jennifer exchanged confused glances. I began to read, steady, each word falling like a hammer. "Being of sound mind and body, I hereby revoke all previous wills. To my son, Robert Harrison, I leave $1, acknowledging he has not been forgotten, but that his actions have demonstrated a lack of respect for family values I hold dear." Robert's face went white. "Dad, what?" I kept reading. "The entirety of my estate, including all business interests, properties, and financial assets, estimated at $6.8 million, shall be transferred to the Arizona Children's Medical Research Foundation." Absolute silence. Then Quinn found her voice. "This is a joke." I folded the document. "No joke. Completely legal. Completely binding." "You can't do this." Her voice rose. "We're your family." I met her eyes calmly. "Family respects each other, Quinn. Family doesn't plan to have the patriarch declared incompetent and locked in Sunset Meadows while draining his accounts." Felicity gasped. Curtis and Jennifer froze. "How did you—" Felicity started. "No, I know everything. The facility visit, the whispered plans, the power of attorney attempt." I looked at Robert. "All of it." My son stared, mouth opening and closing. Quinn's face turned scarlet. "You ungrateful! We've been taking care of you. Living here, putting up with your moods." "Taking care of me?" I raised an eyebrow. "Is that what you call planning to institutionalize me so you can renovate my house and spend my money?" "That's not—" "We never—" Her voice faltered. "I heard you, Quinn. All of you." I looked around the table. "Did you think I was that far gone? That I wouldn't notice the whispers, the plans, the complete lack of respect?" Curtis cleared his throat. "Maybe we should give you privacy." "No. Stay. You should know what your sister tried to do." Robert finally found his voice. "Dad, please. We can talk about this. Work this out." I looked at my son. Really looked. Saw the fear, the desperation. Underneath, I still saw that little boy who used to help me count pills at the pharmacy. But that boy was gone, replaced by this weak man who'd let his wife plot against his father. "There's nothing to work out, Robert. I've made my decision." And I smiled, because finally, after weeks of being invisible, they were all looking at me now, every single one of them. Curtis and Jennifer left within 10 minutes. They made hasty excuses about an early morning tomorrow, thanked Quinn for dinner with forced politeness, and practically ran out the door. I didn't blame them. They'd come for a pleasant Christmas dinner and gotten a front row seat to a family implosion. The moment the door closed behind them, Quinn turned on me. Her face had gone from pale to scarlet, her hands shaking as she gripped the edge of the table. You can't do this. Her voice was shrill. You're our family. We've been living here, taking care of you. I folded the will carefully and placed it back in my jacket pocket. Taking care of me? Is that what you call it? We cook. We clean. We make sure you're okay. You ignore me in my own house. You whisper about putting me in a facility. You tried to get me to sign over power of attorney. I kept my voice level, calm. That's not care, Quinn. That's a hostile takeover. Felicity found her voice trembling with fake emotion. James, sweetie, you've misunderstood everything. We were only looking at Sunset Meadows for research purposes, in case you ever needed it in the future. We care about your well-being. I looked at her with something approaching pity. Felicity, I've been in business for 45 years. I know what manipulation looks like. You're living rent-free in my house, eating my food, spending my money, and plotting to warehouse me so you can take the rest. Don't insult my intelligence. Dad. Robert's voice was barely above a whisper. His face had gone gray. Please, can we talk about this? Just you and me? What's there to talk about, Robert? I didn't know. He stopped, realizing how that sounded. I mean, I didn't agree with everything, but you went along with it anyway. I stood up from the table. You let your wife plan my institutionalization. You tried to trick me into signing legal documents. You sat silently while I was treated like a piece of furniture in my own home. I'm sorry. His voice cracked. I'm so sorry. Sorry you did it, or sorry you got caught. He had no answer for that. Quinn slammed her hand on the table. This is ridiculous. You can't leave everything to charity. What about your son? What about your family? My family died with my wife 12 years ago. The words came out harder than I intended, but they were true. What I have now are people who see me as a bank account with a pulse. Felicity's fake tears started. How can you say that? After everything we've done. What have you done, exactly? I interrupted. You've lived here for 3 years without paying a dime. You've eaten my food, used my utilities, and complained about everything from the temperature to the neighborhood. You haven't worked, haven't contributed, haven't shown me anything resembling gratitude or respect. So please enlighten me. What exactly have you done? She opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. Nothing came out. Quinn changed tactics. You know what? Fine. Keep your money. Give it all to charity. But when you're old and alone and sick, don't come crying to us. I almost laughed. Quinn, I'm 68, and I run 4 successful businesses. I have more friends and professional contacts than you can imagine. I'm already old by your standards, and I'm certainly not alone. The only thing I was too tolerant of people using me. This is elder abuse, Felicity suddenly shouted. We could report you for... She stopped, realizing how absurd that sounded. For what? Changing my own will? Making decisions about my own estate? I shook my head. Arizona law is very clear. I have every right to dispose of my property as I see fit, and I've chosen to leave it to an organization that actually helps children instead of entitled adults who wanted to cash in on my death. Robert stood up, his chair scraping back. I can't believe you think so little of me. I think exactly as much of you as your actions have shown me to think, Robert. You had choices. At every turn, you chose Quinn's approval over your father's dignity. That's not fair, isn't it? I met his eyes. When she wanted me to sign those papers, did you stop her? When she talked about Sunset Meadows, did you defend me? When they whispered about me like I was already gone, did you speak up even once? He looked away. That's what I thought. I walked toward the hallway. I'm going to my room. Feel free to continue your dinner. The dessert looks expensive. Behind me, Quinn's voice rose to a scream. You're going to regret this. We'll fight it. We'll get lawyers. We'll prove you're not competent. I paused at the doorway and turned back. Good luck with that. I had a complete physical in October, including cognitive function tests. Clean bill of health. The will was witnessed by 2 long-term employees and notarized by a licensed professional. My attorney has copies, and they're filed with the court. The look on her face was worth every penny of Charles's fees. Merry Christmas, I said, and went upstairs. I didn't sleep much that night. Through the bedroom door, I could hear raised voices downstairs. Quinn raging, Robert trying to calm her down, Felicity adding her own sharp comments. Around 2 in the morning, it finally went quiet. Christmas morning was tense. I came downstairs around 8 to find Robert sitting alone at the kitchen table, looking like he hadn't slept at all. "Morning," I said neutrally. "Dad?" He looked up, his eyes red. "Can we please talk? Really talk?" "What's there to say, Robert?" "I'm sorry. I know I've said it before, but I mean it. I let things get out of hand. I should have stood up to Quinn. I should have protected you." I poured myself coffee. "Should have. Past tense. It's not too late. We can fix this. I'll talk to Quinn. We can all sit down and... And what? Apologize away months of systematic disrespect? Promise to do better now that the money's at stake?" I shook my head. "I'm 68 years old, Robert. I don't have time for empty promises." "They won't be empty. I swear everything will change. Until I'm actually too old to fight back. Then what?" He flinched. "That's not. I wouldn't let that happen." "You already did let it happen. You let it happen every day for months." Quinn appeared in the doorway, looking worse than Robert. Her makeup was smudged, her hair uncombed, but her voice was cold. "This is your fault, you know. If you'd just been reasonable. If you'd just cooperated with our plans for the family." "Your plans," I corrected. "Not family plans. Yours. We're trying to secure everyone's future by institutionalizing me and spending my money. Forgive me if I don't see that as securing my future." She changed tactics again, and I had to admire her persistence, if nothing else. "You know what? Fine. We'll contest the will. We'll get doctors to evaluate you. We'll prove you're not in your right mind." I sipped my coffee. "You're welcome to try. It'll work. No judge will believe a 68-year-old man suddenly disinherits his only child on Christmas Eve unless there's something wrong with him. Actually, I executed the will on December 17th, a full week before Christmas, with my attorney present, a notary, and 2 witnesses, after having a complete medical evaluation in October showing perfect cognitive function. I set down my cup. "But please, do get a lawyer. I'm sure they'll be happy to take your money before explaining that you have no case." Robert's voice was pleading. "Dad, she's upset. We're all upset. Can't we just change my mind? Make this all go away?" I looked at him. "Robert, I spent 45 years building something, and you were supposed to be part of that legacy. But instead of learning the business, instead of working alongside me, you waited for me to die so you could sell it off and live on the proceeds. That's not true. Then why didn't you ever show interest in the pharmacies? Why didn't you ask to learn? Why was your only financial request that power of attorney trick?" He had no answer. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. Charles Davidson. "James, Merry Christmas. I'm getting calls from lawyers claiming to represent your son and daughter-in-law." "Already? They work fast?" "They're asking about grounds to contest the will, mental competency, undue influence, that sort of thing." He paused. I gave them the standard answer. "The will is valid, properly executed, and you have recent medical documentation of sound mind." "How did they take it?" "About as well as you'd expect. One of them asked about your medical records from October. I told him those were private, but that they existed and showed no cognitive impairment. He wasn't happy." "Let me guess. He wants thousands up front to investigate?" Charles laughed. "Tens of thousands, actually. 25,000 retainer just to review the case." I heard him quote the number to someone on their end. There was quite a bit of shouting after that. "Quinn realizing it's going to cost real money to fight this?" "Seems likely. He also mentioned that even if they did contest, it would take years to litigate and cost easily 6 figures with no guarantee of success." I smiled. "Good. Let them spend their savings trying to get mine." "James, I have to ask, are you absolutely certain about this? Robert is still your son?" "I'm certain. He made his choice when he chose his wife's schemes over his father's dignity." "All right, then. I'll keep you posted if anything develops." The next day, December 26th, I woke to find my study had been ransacked. Papers everywhere, drawers hanging open, files scattered. Quinn and Felicity had been looking for the old will or anything they could use. Too bad for them, I'd moved everything important to my bank's safety deposit box weeks ago. I called Charles. "Can you add attempted theft to my documentation?" "Take photos, lots of them. This actually helps our case if they try anything." By evening, Quinn had apparently called 3 more law firms. I knew because Robert told me. begging me to reconsider before they went broke, trying to fight this. Then don't fight it, I suggested. Accept it and move on. He just shook his head and walked away. I poured myself a scotch and sat in my chair, looking out at the Christmas lights in the neighborhood. Tomorrow I'd give them their eviction notice. Let them see that this wasn't just about money. This was about respect, about dignity, about showing 3 people that you can't treat someone like garbage and expect to inherit their kingdom. The scotch tasted good. Victory tasted better. December 27th arrived with clear skies and a sense of finality. I'd spent the morning reviewing the eviction notices Charles had prepared. 3 identical documents, each one professionally typed, legally sound, and utterly devastating to their recipient. At 10 o'clock, I called them into the living room. Quinn arrived first, her face still puffy from crying or rage or both. Felicity followed, shooting me hateful glares. Robert came last, looking like he hadn't slept in days. Sit, I said, gesturing to the couch. They sat. For once, nobody argued. I placed 3 manila envelopes on the coffee table, one in front of each of them. These are 30-day eviction notices. You have until January 26th to vacate the premises. Robert's face went white. You're evicting us? Your own son? I'm exercising my legal right as the property owner to determine who lives in my home. Under Arizona law, I can terminate any residential arrangement with 30 days written notice. Quinn snatched up her envelope and tore it open. Her hands trembled as she read, This is insane. We have nowhere to go. You have 30 days to find somewhere. That's more time than you gave me respect. Respect? She threw the paper down. We've done nothing but take care of you. I almost laughed. Taking care of me? Yes, let's discuss that. Felicity, how much rent have you paid in 3 years? Felicity's mouth opened and closed. You never asked for $0. Quinn, how much have you contributed to groceries, utilities, property taxes? We help around the house. That's not an answer. Robert, how many times have you asked about learning my business, about working alongside me, about building something together? My son looked at the floor. I have my own career. A career that barely covers your car payment. Meanwhile, you lived here rent-free, waiting for me to die so you could sell my life's work and live off the proceeds. That's not fair. Robert stood up, his voice breaking. I'm your son. Doesn't that mean anything? It meant everything. Past tense. I kept my voice steady. You had a choice, Robert. Every single day you chose Quinn's schemes over your father's dignity. You chose comfort over character. You chose to let your wife plan my institutionalization rather than defend me. I didn't know about all of it. You knew enough. You knew she was looking at Sunset Meadows. You knew about the power of attorney attempt. You knew they were treating me like I was invisible. I paused. You knew, and you did nothing. Quinn's face had turned scarlet. You'll regret this. We'll tell everyone what you've done. We'll ruin your reputation. Go ahead. Tell them I changed my will and evicted my ungrateful family. Tell them I chose to donate my estate to children's medical research instead of leaving it to people who plotted to warehouse me in an expensive facility. I'm sure the community will be horrified. I picked up my coffee cup. I've owned Harrison's Pharmacy for 45 years. I employ 73 people across 4 locations. I'm known in this community as a fair businessman and a generous donor to local causes. You're known as the family that lives in my house and contributes nothing. You're a bitter old man, Felicity shrieked. Perhaps, but I'm a bitter old man who still owns his house, his business, and his dignity. Felicity suddenly clutched her chest, gasping, My heart! Oh, my heart! I didn't move, didn't even look concerned. Are you having the same heart attack you had in November? The one that miraculously disappeared when the paramedics arrived? Her eyes widened. She'd thought I didn't know about that. I called them myself, I continued calmly. After you told Quinn you were having a heart attack to get sympathy. The EMTs found nothing wrong. They told me it happens a lot with attention-seeking behavior. Felicity's hand dropped from her chest. The gasping stopped. Anything else? I looked at each of them. Any other manipulations you'd like to try? More fake emergencies? More threats? More tears? Silence. Then we're done here. You have your notices. I suggest you start looking for apartments. Phoenix has plenty of rentals, though you'll need to actually pay for them this time. Robert's voice was barely a whisper. Dad, please, isn't there any way? No. One word. Final. I'm still your son. And I gave you more time than you gave me respect. 30 days. That's generous, considering. Quinn stood up, trembling with rage. You'll die alone. You'll have nobody. I met her eyes. I'd rather die alone with my dignity than live surrounded by parasites. She grabbed her envelope and stormed out. Felicity followed, shooting me one last hateful glare. Robert lingered. I really am sorry, Dad. I know you are. Sorry you got caught. Sorry you're losing the inheritance. Sorry you have to actually support yourself now. I set down my coffee. But sorry for what you did? Sorry for the choices you made? I don't think so. He left without another word. I sat back in my chair and looked at the eviction notices still on the table. 45 years of building something, and this was what family had become. 3 people who saw me as an obstacle to wealth, rather than a person deserving respect. But now they knew. They knew I wasn't senile, wasn't weak, wasn't just going to fade away while they planned my future. I was James Harrison. I'd built an empire from nothing, and I'd be damned if I let them take it without a fight. December 28th, Sunday morning. The house was quiet in a way it hadn't been in years. Not the tense silence of the past weeks, but actual peace. They were in their rooms packing, and I was in my chair with coffee and the newspaper. Around 9, Robert came downstairs. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, hair uncombed. Dad? I looked up from the business section. Can we talk? Just for a minute? I gestured to the chair across from me. He sat, his movements slow and heavy. I know you've made your decision. I know we can't change your mind about the will or the eviction. He paused. But I need to ask, is there any chance, in the future, that we could try again? Start fresh? I set down the newspaper carefully, looked at my son, really looked at him. 42 years old, and I could still see the little boy who used to help me count inventory at the pharmacy. The teenager who'd been so proud when I opened the second location. The young man who'd chosen insurance over pharmaceuticals because it was less pressure. Where had that transition happened? When had my son stopped being someone I recognized? That boy was gone. This man had made his choices. Robert, do you know what respect is? Yes, of course. I don't think you do. Respect isn't words. It's not apologies after you've been caught. It's not promises to do better once the consequences are clear. I leaned forward. Respect is action. It's defending someone when they're not in the room. It's refusing to participate in plans that harm them. It's choosing what's right over what's comfortable. He nodded slowly, his eyes fixed on his hands. You didn't respect me, Robert. Not when it mattered. Not when Quinn was making her plans. Not when Felicity was making her comments. Not when you had the chance to be my son instead of her husband. I know, his voice cracked. I know I failed you. Yes, you did. Is there any way to fix it? I sat back. Respect can't be returned with words, Robert. Only with actions, and your actions spoke louder than any apology ever could. He closed his eyes. When he opened them, they were wet. So that's it? We're just done? We've been done for a while. You just didn't realize it until there were consequences. He stood up slowly, wiped his eyes. I'm sorry, Dad, for whatever that's worth. It's worth acknowledging, but it doesn't change anything. He nodded and went back upstairs. I heard his footsteps, heavy and defeated. A door closed quietly. I returned to my newspaper, but I wasn't really reading it. I was thinking about legacy, about what we leave behind, about what matters when you've lived 68 years. My phone rang. Charles. James, just confirming. The documents for the Arizona Children's Medical Research Foundation have been filed. They've accepted the future bequest and sent a very gracious letter. Good. They're honored by your generosity. They specifically mentioned that your donation will fund research into pediatric conditions. They'd like to name a research wing after you when the time comes. I hadn't expected that. That's not necessary. They insist? How are you holding up? Fine. Better than fine, actually. No regrets? I looked around my house. My quiet, peaceful house. The morning sunlight streaming through windows I'd had installed 20 years ago. None. You're a stronger man than most, James. I'm a man who spent 68 years learning the difference between family and parasites. That's all. After I hung up, I walked to the window. Outside, Leo Kramer was taking down his Christmas lights, carefully wrapping each strand. He saw me and waved. I waved back. Normal, neighborly, simple respect between two people who asked nothing of each other except basic courtesy. It wasn't complicated. Respect had never been complicated. In a few weeks, this house would be mine again. Truly mine. No more whispers about senility. No more plans for my institutionalization. No more people waiting for me to become convenient to dispose of. I'd built Harrison's Pharmacy from nothing. Started with one location in 1980. Just me and 2 employees. Grew it slowly, carefully. 4 locations now. 73 employees. A reputation that meant something in this community. And when I died, that legacy would help children with medical research instead of funding Quinn's renovations or Robert's comfortable lifestyle or Felicity's retirement. That felt right. That felt just. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel victory. I felt peace. The kind of peace that comes from knowing you did what needed to be done, that you protected what mattered, that you refused to be a victim in your own home. Upstairs, I heard sounds of packing, boxes being taped, drawers emptied, closet doors opening and closing, the sounds of departure. In 30 days, they'd be gone, and I'd still be here, still running my businesses, still going to work every morning, still making my own decisions, still living my life on my terms, still standing. I raised my coffee cup to the empty room, the morning light making the liquid shimmer. To respect, I said quietly, and to knowing when to demand it. The coffee was still hot. The house was still quiet. The December sun was still shining through my windows. And James Harrison was still exactly who he'd always been. A man who built something worth protecting, and protected it. If you like this story, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share your impressions of this story in the comments. To listen to the next story, click on the box on the left.